Imagine this. It's 2:37 p.m. on a Tuesday. The light from your screen is a dull, constant hum. A document is open, the cursor blinking with a slow, metronomic judgment. You know what you need to do. It's clear, it's logical, and a part of you genuinely wants to do it. But your body feels heavy, as if filled with sand. Your mind, a frantic bird beating against a glass pane, will do anything, but land on the task at hand. You check the news, you reorganize your desk for the third time, you fall into a deep-dive internet search on the migratory patterns of the Arctic tern. Anything to escape the gravitational pull of that single, blinking line. And then, the voice arrives. It's a familiar, corrosive whisper in your ear. You're so lazy. It feels true, doesn't it? It feels like a fundamental flaw in your character, a lack of moral fiber, a broken gear in your internal engine. You look at others who seem to move with purpose and you assume they possess something you lack. Discipline, willpower, a simple ability to do the thing. But what if you've been wrong? What if that story is a lie, a convenient fiction that keeps you trapped? What if your laziness isn't real? Consider a different possibility, a more radical and unsettling truth. What if this feeling, this paralysis, this avoidance, this soul-deep inertia, is not a sign of weakness, but a signal? What if it is not a malfunction, but a message? You are not lazy. You are rebelling. Your soul is on strike. It has downed tools and is refusing to build a life it doesn't believe in. This isn't apathy, it's a protest. A silent, desperate protest against a task, a goal, or a path that feels empty. The psychologist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, who peered into the deepest abyss of human suffering and found meaning there, saw this clearly. He wrote, "Apathy is the soul's protest against meaningless work." Let that thought settle. Apathy, the very thing we mistake for laziness, is not nothingness. It is a response. It is the soul's last resort when it feels its deepest needs, for purpose, for creation, for authenticity, are being systematically ignored. It is a non-violent, internal sit-in against a regime of the trivial. So the urgent question today is not, how do I force myself to be more productive? That is the question of the slave, trying to be a more efficient slave. The real, the terrifying, the essential question is this: if your inaction is a rebellion, then what, precisely, is your soul rebelling against? What is the tyrant it refuses to serve? The answer is not simple, and it will require us to journey into the hidden architecture of your mind, to confront the ghosts in your machine. But the first step is to stop blaming yourself for a crime you did not commit. Your laziness is a symptom. The disease is a life asking you to betray yourself. To understand this disease, we must first uncover the hidden force that creates it. So, if it's not laziness, what is this force that holds you in its grip? This is not a simple lack of effort, it is a profound, internal conflict. To understand it, we must venture into the hidden architecture of the self, where your conscious will battle ancient, subterranean powers. The first layer of this conflict is psychological. Picture your mind not as a unified whole, but as a kingdom with rival factions. Sigmund Freud mapped this territory as the ID, the ego, and the superego. But it was his protégé, Carl Jung, who gave the rebellion its most poignant name. He called it the shadow, the vast, hidden part of your personality that contains everything you have been forced to repress. Your wild creativity, your untamed passions, your so-called unacceptable desires. When you force yourself onto a path that your soul knows is wrong, the shadow does not argue. It does not negotiate. It simply sabotages. It pulls the emergency brake on your life. The paralysis you feel is the friction between the person you are pretending to be and the person you are meant to become. This internal civil war is amplified by an existential vacuum. Viktor Frankl, writing from the ashes of the Holocaust, observed that the primary drive of a human being is not pleasure, as Freud believed, but meaning. When that drive is thwarted, when we are condemned to a life of repetitive, soulless tasks, the psyche does not just get bored, it declares a state of emergency. Frankl saw that this absence of meaning creates an existential vacuum, a void that manifests as apathy. Your soul would rather feel nothing than endorse an activity that bedies its very reason for existing. It is a brutal, self-preserving calculus. Better to be numb than to be a willing participant in your own annihilation. But where does this meaningless work come from? Why does modern life so often feel like a betrayal of our deeper nature? Here, we enter the philosophical arena. Friedrich Nietzsche foresaw this crisis with terrifying clarity. He described a progression of the human spirit. First, the camel, the beast of burden that kneels down to be loaded with the thou shalts of society, family, and tradition. It carries the weight of external expectations willingly. This is the phase of dutiful compliance. But eventually, in the deepest desert, the camel transforms into the lion. The lion's purpose is to say a sacred no. To the camel, to the dragon of thou shalt, to the entire oppressive weight of the past. The lion must slay the dragon to create freedom for itself. Your resistance, your so-called laziness, is the roar of that lion, still trapped in the body of the camel. It is the first, chaotic, and misunderstood signal that your spirit is ready to fight for its own sovereignty. You are not broken, you are in a state of metamorphosis. The system you live in, however, has no language for this transformation. It can only diagnose it as a malfunction. This is the hidden problem. You have been conditioned to carry a weight, and you are now being punished for feeling the strain. You have been given a script to follow, and you are being called a bad actor for forgetting your lines, when the real tragedy is the play itself. But what happens when this silent rebellion is left unheeded? What is the cost of ignoring the lion's roar? Ignoring this internal rebellion is not a neutral act. It is a slow, psychic poison. The consequences of mistaking your soul's protest for a personal failing are not just a few missed deadlines or a cluttered home. They are a silent, creeping catastrophe that reshapes your reality from the inside out. The first and most personal consequence is what the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called the sickness unto death. He defined this not as a physical illness, but as despair, the condition of a self that is unable to be itself. When you consistently override the lion's roar, you create a fracture between your actions and your authentic nature. This dissonance does not simply vanish, it metabolizes. It transforms into a low-grade hum of anxiety, a persistent depression that has no clear source. It becomes a chronic fatigue that sleep cannot cure, because it is not the body that is tired, but the spirit. You are living a life of self-betrayal, and your biology is registering the treason. This is not a metaphor. The stress of inauthenticity floods your system with cortisol, tightens your muscles with unexpressed action, and whispers to your immune system that you are living under a constant, invisible threat. To escape this internal tension, your mind, clever and desperate, will seek refuge in what the psychoanalyst Ernest Becker called immortality projects, and what we might call distraction engines. You numb the ache with the endless scroll of social media, the hypnotic glow of streaming services, the compulsive chase of consumerism, or the drama of other people's lives. These are not merely bad habits, they are sophisticated coping mechanisms for a meaning crisis. They are the painkillers you take for a soul fever. But like any painkiller, they only mask the symptoms while the disease, the disconnect from your own purpose, festers and grows. This personal crisis then scales into a societal one, creating what we might call the architecture of avoidance. Our entire culture has, in many ways, become a machine designed to help us manage this pain of inauthenticity. We are offered a smorgasbord of identities to consume: the busy professional, the dedicated parent, the savvy influencer, all pre-packaged lifestyles that allow us to outsource the terrifying responsibility of creating our own meaning. We engage in what Jean-Paul Sartre called bad faith, the act of pretending we are not free, of convincing ourselves we are merely the waiter playing the role of waiter, rather than a free consciousness choosing that role every second. We hide from our freedom in the comfort of our constraints. The ultimate, chilling consequence is a collective spiritual numbness. A society of people who are efficient, productive, and perpetually bored. Who have everything to live with, and nothing to live for. We become like beautifully crafted ships, with polished decks and full sails, drifting in a windless sea. We have mastered the how of living, but have forgotten the why. The trap has been set, not by a villain, but by a misunderstanding. You are fighting yourself, believing the enemy is your own laziness, when all along, it has been your own imprisoned potential, screaming to be let out. But how do you break free? The key is not to try harder within the cage, but to realize the cage itself was never locked. The way out is not to silence the rebellion, but to join it. The path to liberation begins with a radical, counterintuitive shift, Stop fighting the resistance and start listening to it. Your soul is not your enemy. It is your most loyal informant, trying to guide you back to your own path. The goal is not to become a more efficient camel, but to complete the transformation into the lion, and then, as Nietzsche prophesied, to eventually become the child, the creator of new values, who can say a sacred yes to a life of their own design. This begins with a new dialogue with your own psyche. Instead of asking, "How can I force myself to do this?" you must learn to ask the more courageous, diagnostic question, "What is this resistance protecting me from?" Is it protecting your time? Your integrity? A nascent talent that feels too vulnerable to expose? This is where you engage with your shadow, not as a monster, but as a misunderstood ally. Use a practice akin to Carl Jung's active imagination. Sit in quiet contemplation with the feeling of resistance. Let it speak. Give it a voice in a journal. You may find that the task you're avoiding isn't hard, it's empty. It doesn't align with your skills, your values, or your sense of purpose. The resistance was simply the only tool your psyche had to point this out. Next, you must weaponize the insights of Viktor Frankl. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Your rebellion creates that space. The paralysis is the gap. Use it. In that pause, insert a single purposeful question. For the sake of what? Are you doing this for money? For approval? For security? Or are you doing it for meaning, for growth, for a cause greater than yourself? If you cannot find a noble yes, asterisk, then your sacred duty becomes to find a respectful no asterisk. This no is not negation. It is the creation of space. It is the lion's roar carving out a territory for your soul to breathe. Finally, you must move from internal inquiry to external architecture. You cannot think your way into a new life. You must build it through action. This is not about monumental, exhausting effort. It is about what the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu called Wei Wu Wei, the action of non-action. It is the effortless flow that comes from aligning with your nature. Start with a refusal ritual. Identify one small, meaningless task that drains your spirit and consciously, ceremoniously, stop doing it. See what happens. The world will not end. Then, perform a soulful gesture. Do one tiny, insignificant thing that feels authentically you. Sketch for 5 minutes. Walk in the woods without a phone. Tinker on a project that will never make money. These are not tasks. They are signals. They are messages in a bottle you send to your own soul, saying, "I am still here. I hear you. We are going to build a way out, together." This is how you break free. Not by conquering yourself, but by reclaiming yourself. One conscious question, one respectful refusal, one soulful gesture at a time. You are not managing a problem. You are founding a new republic of the self. Here, then, is the ultimate truth, the revelation that changes everything. Your resistance is not the obstacle to your life. It is the path. The paralysis, the apathy, the rebellion, these were never signs of a broken will. They were the coordinates to a buried treasure, the map your soul drew to lead you back to itself. The entire journey of feeling stuck was a brutal, necessary, and exacting curriculum designed by your deepest nature to force you to ask the only question that matters. Who would you be if you were not forced to be anyone else? This is the final stage of the metamorphosis Nietzsche described. You began as the camel, burdened by external demands. You then became the lion, roaring your sacred no to create freedom. But now, you must become the child, the state of innocence and forgetting, a new beginning, a game, a self-propelling wheel, a first movement. The child does not carry old values or merely destroy them. It creates new ones from a place of pure, unburdened being. Your resistance was the labor pain of this birth. The life you are meant to live is not one you find, pre-packaged and waiting. It is one you invent, moment by moment, from the raw material of your authentic desires and innate gifts. Viktor Frankl's insight reaches its fullest expression here. He wrote, "What is to give light must endure burning." You have endured the burning, the friction of a life that did not fit, the heat of shame for not fitting into it. That was not a punishment. It was the process of becoming fuel for your own light. The meaning you crave is not a static object to be discovered, but a dynamic force to be enacted. It is the light you generate by burning the question, "What is my soul refusing?" and using the answer as kindling for a new way of being. Look back now at your history of so-called laziness. See it for what it truly is, a long, coded, and faithful correspondence from your truest self. Every time you chose numbness over complicity, every time you felt that heavy weight in your chest at the thought of a meaningless task, you were not failing. You were honoring a silent covenant with your own potential. You were, in your own imperfect way, saying no to a life of quiet annihilation. The world will continue to offer you its scripts, its prefabricated identities, its cages of comfort. But you can no longer unsee the key you hold in your hand. You are the architect of your meaning, the author of your defiance, the guardian of your own soul's fire. So let the great question echo in the silence you have carved out, not as an accusation, but as a compass. What is your soul refusing? And now that you know it is your deepest wisdom speaking, not a flaw, what will you finally, courageously, create in the space that refusal opens?